Okay, let's begin. Today, I'm going to talk to you about Kriyat Yam Suf, splitting of the sea, which took place when?
A week off.
Correct. What we now mark as the seventh day of Pesach. So, and I'm going to use this opportunity also to go over sort of the chronology of what happened leading up to and following Yetziat Mitzrayim and Kriyat Yam Suf, and it'll also help us understand a little bit about how Pesach is mapped out, which is why I've written on the board for the month of Nisan, the 14th, which we very often call Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach, and then the 15th is the first day of Pesach, and the 21st is the last day of Pesach, the seventh day of Pesach. And I want to go over what happened on all of those days, and also in a bigger sense, what does Kriyat Yam Suf have to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim? Why is it connected, incorporated into Pesach? So on one side of the page, we'll have some sources that say that I've labeled Kriyat Yam Suf, and on the other side are some excerpts, some quotes, mostly from Psukim, here and there, Rashi. So when we talk about Pesach, and when the Torah uses the term Chag HaMatzot, they sound interchangeable, but they're really not. And I've mentioned this to my class before. They're not really interchangeable, at least not in the Torah. There's Pesach and there's Chag HaMatzot. Let me show you what I mean. Pesach, meaning when the Korban Pesach is offered and roasted and eaten, that's the 14th. The 14th, what we very often refer to as Erev Pesach. So this is Pesach. And to be more precise, I'm now going to describe the way Pesach was observed once essentially once Bnei Yisrael went into Eretz Yisrael. Namely, on the 14th of Nisan, the Korban Pesach was sacrificed. That means it was slaughtered, blood was collected, the blood was sprinkled on the altar, then the Korban itself, which was either a male sheep or a goat of 1 year of age, then it was roasted in its entirety on an open fire, so the fire actually touches the outside of the Korban, and it's roasted in its entirety. And then that night it is eaten. When does this happen? It happens on the 14th. Precisely, it happens what the Torah calls Bein Ha'arbayim, which is another way of saying in the afternoon. After high noon, when the last of the regular korbanot were offered, which is called the Korban Tamid, the daily sacrifice. There's a daily sacrifice in the morning and one in the afternoon. So after the daily sacrifice was offered, that's when the Korban Pesach was offered, meaning, as I said, slaughtered, blood collected, blood sprinkled on the altar. I should also mention the fact that it is skinned and roasted. And then that night, which we call Seder night, the night of the Seder, is when the Korban Pesach would be eaten. So Pesach, the way the Torah uses the term Pesach, lasts from the 14th, arguably from midday of the 14th. There's a whole discussion about whether the morning is also called Pesach, but let's let that be. The 14th, and extends into the night, which we call the night of the Seder, and the Korban Pesach had to have been eaten during the night, by midnight. So from midday to midnight, essentially, from the midday of the 14th till midnight, which is already the 15th, that's Pesach. That's Pesach. Then there is Chag HaMatzot, the way the Torah uses the term Chag HaMatzot. Chag HaMatzot. Chag HaMatzot is the 7-day Chag from the 15th, what we call the first day of Pesach, till the 21st, the 7th day of Pesach. Chag HaMatzot is 7 days long. The Seder night is actually, just in terms of structure and terminology, the Seder night is the overlap between Pesach and Chag HaMatzot. It's the time when the Korban Pesach, which was offered on the 14th, is eaten. That's the part of the avodah of that Korban. And it's the beginning of the 7-day Chag HaMatzot. That's the way the Torah, as a matter of fact, not only the Torah, but the whole Tanakh uses these terms. It's later on in history, mostly in the Mishnah and later, that these two terms became kind of interchangeable. And then we thought of the 14th as the Erev Pesach. But these are the way the words are used in the Tanakh. Now, what I just described, essentially, which I hope is understandable, yes, is the way that Pesach and Chag HaMatzot would be observed once Bnei Yisrael would go into the land of Israel. Torah says that explicitly. We read that actually this past Shabbat in what's called Parshat HaChodesh, that said that the full observance of Pesach and Chag HaMatzot would only start once Bnei Yisrael would go into Eretz Yisrael, and then would remain permanent forevermore, whether or not there was a Beit HaMikdash, but that's when it would take effect. What about before that? What happened in Egypt? Well, in Egypt, there was no Chag HaMatzot. In Egypt, there was only Pesach, and it was a special way of doing Pesach. There were things that were done in the Pesach in Mitzrayim. That's the way that Chazal referred to it. Pesach Mitzrayim. Pesach is done in Egypt. There are elements of that that were not repeated subsequently. It was unique to Pesach Mitzrayim. For example, the blood that was collected was not sprinkled on the altar. There was no altar. Instead, the Torah says that the blood should be sprinkled, should be dabbed on the two doorposts and the lintel of the homes where people were going to eat the Korban Pesach. There's that, but that's only applies to Pesach in Mitzrayim. It says that in Mitzrayim they have to eat their the Korban Pesach, as it were, dressed, ready to travel, staff in your hand, with shoes on your feet, because Hashem is going to tell them that it's time to go, and they have to be ready. That's generally called chipazon, in haste. That wasn't a requirement in subsequently to be dressed for the road with a staff in your hand. Well, you can have customs and reenactment, but there was no obligation. Those are some of the elements that make Pesach Mitzrayim unique. The Korban Pesach, under all circumstances, it was eaten, as I said, roasted, but had to be eaten accompanied by matzah and maror. That's always the case, Pesach Mitzrayim and subsequent. But the Torah says once you go into the land of Israel, you're going to have Pesach, and there are differences, and the Torah talks about what those differences are, and then you're going to have Chag HaMatzot, which will start that night. So far, so good? Yes, please.
So after they got the Torah, every year they would do the Seder, and even in the Midbar?
That's not what I said. I said Pesach in its fully only took effect when they went into the land of Israel, which means that they should not have even had to do the Pesach in the Midbar. But they did. Who's learning Sefer Bamidbar? Yes? Did you do that in Parshat Balotecha? No? So in the Midbar, the first year anniversary after Yetziat Mitzrayim, Hashem gave a special order saying, observe the Korban Pesach in the Midbar. So you might say there was Pesach Mitzrayim before the Exodus, the night before the Exodus. Then there was Pesach Bamidbar, which was unique. It only happened once. And then there was what they call Pesach Ledorot, Pesach for all future generations, which would only go into effect once they entered the land of Israel. Had there not been a sin of the Meraglim, then there would have only been one Pesach Bamidbar, and then the following year they would have already found themselves in Canaan, in the land of Israel. However, because of the sin of the Meraglim, as we are aware, there were 39 years without Pesach, without the Korban Pesach. Anyway, whether or not there was matzah, Chag HaMatzot, doesn't seem that there was. Certainly not the obligation to do so. Okay. Yes.
I just feel like Chag HaMatzot, maybe this is just like people's lack of understanding or my own. I feel like Chag HaMatzot is used interchangeably with Pesach. Like,
it said that because that's what happened roughly at by the time of the Mishnah. By the time of the Mishnah, Chazal are using these terms interchangeably. So, for example, in the tefillot that we say during Pesach, we call it Chag HaMatzot. That's kind of the liturgical name if you want to be fancy. We talk about Pesach, we talk about Chag HaMatzot. We use those interchangeably, but the Torah doesn't. The Torah is very, very clear about it. Now, what actually happened in Mitzrayim? So, also, as we read this past Shabbat in Parshat HaChodesh, we have the very first time Bnei Israel are told to prepare the Korban Pesach. They're actually told in Mitzrayim to select, or if necessary, purchase the animal for the Korban Pesach 4 days before. That wasn't really absolutely necessary in subsequent years, but that's the way it was done in Mitzrayim, and it had to be watched. And on the night of the 14th, okay, they had already selected. Remember also, Korban Pesach always has to be eaten in a group. One family, two families can join together. That's because everybody, certainly every adult, male and female, was required to eat at least the kazait of the Korban Pesach. There are other rules as well. They all had to eat, and you're really not supposed to have anything left over. So if you have a small family, they're not going to eat it all up. So they can join, families can join together. So you become part of what the halacha calls a chabura. It's a group. In Mitzrayim, they slaughtered the sacrifice on the 14th in the afternoon. They collected the blood, put it on the two doorposts and the lintel, and then they roasted it. And then that night, they ate it. But what else was happening in Mitzrayim that night? Makat Bechorot, the slaying of the firstborn. And Bnei Israel were told to stay inside and so on. So that night is Makat Bechorot. Paro freaks out, says, just go. But they don't go until Hashem tells them to go. And they go on the 15th in the morning. And that's when they begin their journey. So on the 14th, in Mitzrayim, they had the Korban Pesach in the way that I described it. Also was Bechorot, Makat Bechorot going on at the same time that night. But in the morning is when they left. Then what? Remember that Moshe constantly said to Paro, we're going to go into the wilderness for a period of 3 days. But when Paro says, this is a very, very simple answer to the question, why didn't they come back after 3 days? Because Paro kicked them out. Said, just go. That's a very simple answer to that question. So expel them. Take a look now at the side of the page that has the sources, not my handwriting, Kriyat Yam Suf, the other side. Vayisu b'nei Yisrael mei Ra'amses they traveled from Ramses, which was in Egypt. It was seemed to be the rallying point, the point for all Bnei Israel to come together. And they traveled from there to a place called Sukkota. That is what my students call the Brooklyn Hay, meaning like Brooklyna would be to Brooklyn. They went to Sukkot, and it says even how many people were there, or Kishesh Meot Elef Ragli Hagvarim Levad Mitaf. Right, it's a sizable group of people, 600,000 men. Gives you an idea of how large is the available army. So that's on the 15th. That's on the 15th. So on the 15th, which we later would celebrate as the first day of Pesach, but remember, for them it isn't Pesach, or it isn't even Chag HaMatzot anymore. They finished Pesach. Chag HaMatzot would not go into effect until the future. So on the 15th, they go from Ramses to Sukkot. Good. Look at Rashi. I excerpted Rashi there. Says Rashi on that pasuk, Miram says Sukkota, Huf Chaf Mil. That's 120 Roman miles, which is a Roman mile is 2,000 paces, or 1,470. What?
I said that close.
Yeah, 1,470 meters. I don't know how much that is in yards, but anyway, it's a long distance. Ubal sham lefi sha'ah, and they got there like in an hour, very quickly. So this is one miracle that Hashem is doing, enabling this large group of people, men, women, and children, and animals, and everything, to go that whole distance in a very brief time. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, "Va'esa etchem al kanfei nisharim." I carried you on the wings of eagles, which means, or the nesher means an eagle. What?
Not through that street up there?
No. Okay, so that's what happened on the 15th day. That's also the 15th of Nisan. They're also surrounded by the Ananei Kavod. Very good. Vayhi, continuing on the sheet. Vayhi be'etzem hayom hazeh, it was on that very same day, Hotzi Hashem et bnei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim al tzivotam. Hashem took them out of Egypt by their armies, which also means that they knew which tribes they belonged to as well. Then, what happens next? Well, on the next pasuk said, the next pasuk I excerpted, Vayisu me Sukkot. Sukkot is already outside of Egypt. Okay, they've crossed the border, and this place is called Sukkot. Vayisu me Sukkot, Vayachanu be'etam. Biktzei HaMidbar, this place called Eitam, on the edge of the desert. That's on the 16th. So they go from Sukkot to Eitam, which is on the edge of the desert. So far, so good? Says Rashi, Vayisu misukot b'yom hasheni. On the second day of their journey, Shaharei Berishon Ba'omiram says the Sukkot. Okay, that's what I put up on the board. Okay, and then what? Well, there is a tradition in Chazal. It's a little hard to prove it, except to say that it's part of Torah Sheba'al Peh, that Yetziat Mitzrayim, the 15th, was a Thursday, which means the 17th was Shabbat. And they rested. They didn't travel any further on that day. So that's what happened on the 17th. And then comes the 18th. On the 18th, they prepare to continue. Well, let's read the psukim. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. This is presumably after Shabbat, Sunday the 18th.
Wait, who says that it was Shabbat?
It's a rabbinic tradition. It's part of Torah Sheba'al Peh that Yetziat Mitzrayim itself was a Thursday. which means that the 17th is Shabbat. Yeah,
So the term weren't like chasing them.
Not yet.
Yeah, I guess.
Not yet.
It has been 3 days.
not yet. Right. As we're going to see how that happens. Good. V'yidaber Hashem al Moshe lemor. Hashem says to Moshe, Daber al bnei Yisrael, speak to the children of Israel, v'yashuvu, and let them return. V'yachanu lifnei pi achirot. Hashem is telling him to change course and encamp in front of this place called Pi Hachirot, which is named after an avodah zarah. Bein Migdol uvein hayam, lifnei Baal Tzifon. That's the location of where they're going to be. Baal Tzifon is the actual avodah zarah. Nichechol, facing that avodah zarah. Tachanu al hayam, encamp near the sea, the Yam Suf. Hashem is telling them to change course, and that's on the that's what's going to happen next. And Hashem says why He's telling him to do this. Ve'amar Paro livnei Yisrael, which means Paro will then say about Bnei Yisrael when he finds out. And don't ask yet how he finds out. We'll get to that in a moment. But when he finds out that you've changed course, here's what he's going to say. Nivuchim hem ba'aretz. They're perplexed. They're confused in the land. They've got entangled. Sagar alehem hamidbar. The wilderness is enclosed in them. I don't know if you've ever done a tiyul in the Sinai, for example. It could be very confusing. There are no markers. So he's going to say, oh, they don't know where they are. They've lost their way. This is Hashem still talking. I will make Paro's heart strong, meaning I'm going to bring back the old Paro stubbornness. And he's going to chase after you. And I, Hashem says, will be glorified through Paro and all of his army. And then Egypt will know Hashem, that I am Hashem. And they did this. So this is when they change course. But there's more. It was told to the king of Egypt that the people had fled. We'll see in a moment how he knows that. And Paro's heart and the heart of his servants changed, meaning with regard to them. Elham. And they said, what have we done to release Israel from our service? Says Rashi, right? This next excerpt is once again from Rashi. How did Paro find out? Iktorin, which in what I took this from, put in, I don't know if Rashi said this, agentin, agents, spies. Shalach imahem. Paro planted spies among Bnei Yisrael. We do know that they left also with Erev Rav, a bunch of other people also kind of hitched a ride on Bnei Yisrael when they were leaving. So Paro planted agents among them. The kevan shehigiu l'shloshet yamim, when they got to 3 days, shekavu leleich v'lashuv, that they had established that they're going to go and then they're going to return. V'ra'u she'einan chozrin l'Mitzrayim, they see they're not going back. Ba'u, then the agents came. V'higidu l'Faro b'yom Dalet, on the 4th day. That's Sunday. So this is the day that they change course, and the spies return to Paro and tell him about this. So Bnei Yisrael prepared to continue. Agents of Paro to continue. The agents of Paro talked about this, and they went back to Paro. And Moshe, as we read in the Psukim, Bnei Yisrael did what they were supposed to do. In other words, Moshe told them that you have to go back as if you're going towards Egypt, but you're not fleeing. This is all in order to trick Paro. I'm continuing in Rashi. Uvachamishi v'shishi. This is the first day, second day, third day, fourth day. The 5th day and the 6th day. What happens on those 2 days, says Rashi. Radafu acharehem. That's when the Egyptians started pursuing. Okay, the spies come, and Paro and his army are in hot pursuit on the 19th and the 20th, which are the 5th and the 6th day of the since the Exodus. Yeah. If what?
The spies went back to Egypt from 18. How long did it take for them to get there?
Probably not very long. But Israel, had to travel at their pace. The spies are individuals, so they could have gotten back pretty quickly. And at least the way the Midrash that Rashi is quoting presents it, it sounds like same day. And then Paro said, "What are we going to do?" As we're going to see in the next psukim. Yeah.
So I think 2 questions. So was Hashem the only one that knew that the course was going to change?
No, Hashem told Moshe, and Moshe told Bnei Israel, and they did it. They followed.
Did that? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, they followed the orders.
But they did that to trick, not to trick, but to misdirect the
Yeah.
culture. So when did Bnei Israel find out that they were going to change course?
According to the Midrash that Rashi is referring to, Moshe told Bnei Israel what they were doing,
Okay.
and they went along with it.
So Moshe had to before they left, he told Paro, "This is the course we're
No, Paro said, "Just get out."
This-
So they go.
Yeah.
3 days pass. The agents don't. The agents see that they're not returning to Egypt. Exactly. So the agents go back. Meanwhile, Bnei Israel is changing course, and they are they're next to the sea.
We change course means that they're not going back to Mitzrayim. That's what change course means, or change course means
Change
they're not
course
going
means
down to-
they make it look like that they got lost.
that they got lost.
Mhm.
Okay. So, but okay, yeah.
So on the 5th and the 6th day, Radfu achareihem, they pursued after them. The Egyptians pursued. Velel Shavi'i, on the night of the 7th, over here, the beginning of the 7th, what we'll later call the 7th day of Pesach, on the night of the 7th, Yaradu Layam, that's when Bnei Israel went down into the sea. B'shacharit Amru Shira, in the morning they sang the song. V'hu Yom Shvi'i Shel Pesach, and that is, or eventually became, the 7th day of Pesach. Lachein anu korim hashira b'yom hashvi. That's why we read, as part of Kriyat Torah, on the 7th day, we read the Shira. Shira here means, which one? Shirat Hayam, also known as Az Yashir. Az Yashir Moshe. So, this is a busy day. On the 21st is when, at night, is the Kriyat Yam Suf. Kriyat, the splitting of Yam Suf. And in the morning is Shirat Hayam. Right, at night is when they went down into the sea and the Egyptians pursued. Here's at least some of the description of what happened. Vayesoret brichbo v'etamola kachimo. Paro harnessed his own chariot, and he pursued his people to come with. Persuaded his people to come with him. Vayikach 600 rechav bachul. He took 600 choice chariots, v'chol rechav Mitzrayim, and all of the other chariots of Egypt, v'shalishim, those are lieutenants al kulo, v'yechazek Hashem et leiv Paro, that Hashem said he's going to make Paro stubborn, so he does, and he pursues, v'yirdof acharei b'nei Yisrael, u'b'nei Yisrael yotzim b'yad ramah, v'yirdofu Mitzrayim achareihem, Egypt continues to pursue after them, v'yasigu otam, and they caught up to them, chonim alayam, encamped by the sea, kol sus rechev Paro, or all of the horses and chariots of Egypt, ufarashav, and his horsemen, v'chelo, and his army, and al Piachirot, next to this place called Piachirot, l'fnei Baal Tzefon. Paro gets closer, Bnei Yisrael lift their eyes, and they see Egypt is coming after them. and they panic. They're very afraid, and they cry out to Hashem. That's the end of Pasuk Yud. Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael el Hashem. And then they say to Moshe, this Pasuk Yud Aleph, they say to Moshe, Hamibli ein kvarim b'Mitzrayim lekachtanu lamut b'midbar? Is it because there weren't enough graves in Egypt that you took us to die in the wilderness? Ma zot asita lanu? What have you done to us? Lotzianu Mitzrayim, to take us out from Egypt. And they tell Moshe, didn't we tell you back in Egypt, just leave us alone? Let's just continue being slaves. We're better serving Egypt than dying in the wilderness. And Moshe says, Pasuk Yud Gimel, he says to the people, Al tira'u, don't be afraid. Hityatzavu, stand still. Uru'u et Yeshuat Hashem, and see the salvation of Hashem. Asher yaseh lachem hayom, that Hashem will do for you today. Ki asher yi'item et Mitzrayim hayom, just as you have seen Egypt today. Lo tosifu l'rotam od ad olam. You'll never see them this way again. They're going to be wiped out. Hashem yilachem lachem. Hashem will fight for you, like on your behalf. Ve'atem tacharishun, and you should remain silent. Let's pause there for a moment. Flip over the page, and let's look at the first of the sources that I cut and pasted. Midrash Mechilta. When Moshe addresses Bnei Yisrael and says, don't worry, actually it's a reflection of the fact that Bnei Yisrael themselves weren't even united in how to deal with the situation. Arba kitin na'asu od al hayam. 4 different factions came into being at that time. In other words, different people had different ideas as to what they should do. Achat omeret, one said, lipol al hayam, let's just jump into the sea, let's commit mass suicide. Ve'achat omeret, one of them said, Lashub Mitzrayim, let's just give up and go back to Egypt. Ve'achat omeret la'asot milchama kenegdo, let's go to war against them, let's fight. Ve'achat omeret mitzvach kenegdo, let's just scream against them, which is a military tactic. It's a military. No, it's not just let's scream. It's scream at them. It's a military tactic to make the enemy think there are more of you than there actually are. Just to give you a more modern version of that. In the center of Jerusalem, there is a place called Kikar Davidka. Anybody know? It's called that because in the center of that Kikar, there is a contraption that is known as a Davidka. That was a weapon that was created for the War of Independence, 1948. It's called Davidka because it was named after the person who invented it, a guy named Davidka. But the point is, it was a weapon, but it purposely made more noise than it needed to, in order to sound like we had more arms than we actually did. So sometimes screaming is helpful. So that's what these are the four factions. Now, Zot she'amra lipol al hayam, that group that said, let's jump into the sea, nomar lahem, who said to them, this is what Moshe says to them, hityatzvu, just stand still. In other words, don't jump into the sea, just stay still. Uru et Yeshuat Hashem, see Hashem's salvation. Zosha Amra Nashuv leMitzrayim, those that said, let's go back to Egypt, Ne'amar lahem, who said to them, Ki asher yitem et Mitzrayim, just as you saw Egypt now, you're never going to see them again forever. In other words, no, you're not going back to Egypt. Zosha Amra Na'aseh milchama, those that said that let's go to war against them, Ne'amar lahem Hashem yilachem lachem, you're not going to fight. This time, Hashem is going to fight for you. What about those that said, let's scream? Zosha aman nitzvach kenegdam, nemar lahem, v'atem tachrishun, keep quiet. So the things that Moshe says, according to this midrash, are ways of addressing the 4 different factions that come into being at this moment. Let's go back to the sources on the other side. We're up to Pasuk Tet Vav. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe, Ma titzak elai. Why are you screaming out to me? Sounds like even Moshe was praying. Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yisau. Speak to b'nei Yisrael that they should travel. Just go. Don't do anything. Just go. V'ata, but you, Moshe, haremet maktecha, raise your staff, uneteet yadecha halayam, extend your hand over the sea, uvkaehu, and split it. V'yavo b'nei Yisrael b'toch hayam bayabasha. B'nai Yisrael are going to walk in the midst of the sea on dry land. Va'ani, what am I going to do? Hashem says, Hineni mechazek et Mitzrayim. I'm going to make them stubborn again. V'yavo achareihem. They're going to come after you. V'kaveda b'faro v'chol chelo. I will be glorified through what I'm going to do to Paro and all of his army. And then everybody is going to know that I am Hashem. This is a continuation in a real sense of what Hashem was saying back in Egypt about the 10 plagues. What was the purpose of what are the purposes, maybe not just one, of the Makot in Mitzrayim? Well, to show that Hashem is in control, to show that there's only one God, that the various deities of Egypt are nothing, but and also to show that Hashem pays special attention and cares for his people, and ultimately to glorify Hashem. The same kind of language is used here, which suggests that the goals of Yetziat Mitzrayim and the Makot were to be completed in their entirety by the splitting of the sea, which is one reason why the seventh day of Pesach, which is when the splitting of the sea took place, is part of Chag HaMatzot. It's not a separate festival. It's part of it. That's something to think about. We'll see some more sources on that basis. Okay, the angel goes between Egypt and Israel, and as we know, I'll just kind of summarize here. Bnei Yisrael go in, and Egypt pursues. Let's see. Okay, source number 2. Bisha'a, this is on this side. Bisha'a shebikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahatbi'at Mitzrayim bayam. When at the moment that Hashem wanted to drown the Egyptians, okay, it's coming to that moment that Hashem is going to save Bnei Yisrael and drown the. I hope I'm not giving away too much of the story. And drown the Egyptians. Amad Uza Sar Shel Mitzrayim. Uza, which is the what's the word? The guardian angel of the nation of Egypt, stood up before the heavenly court. V'nishtateach, and he prostrated himself before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'amar lefanav, Ribono shel olam, b'midat harachamim barata olam. You created the world with the aspect of mercy. Lama ata rotzeh lahatbiach et banai. Why are you going to drown my sons? This is the angel that represents Egypt. Why are you going to drown them? Miyad Kinas HaKadosh Baruch Hu kol pamalya shel mala. Hashem assembled the entire. Pamalia is the group, the heavenly court, and he says to them, okay, open debate. What is your argument? Should Bnei Yisrael be saved? Should the Egyptians be? Should they be drowned? So all of the other angels that represent all of the other nations make their argument, and they want to defend Sanegoria. They want to defend Egypt. No, why should they be drowned? Well, what changed the course of the debate? Kevan Shara Michael. Michael is the angel that very often argues in favor of Bnei Yisrael. So he saw that. Ramaz Gabriel, he gave a signal to Gabriel, who's very fast. The tas. How do we use the word tas in modern Hebrew? It's to fly, like in a plane. So the word appears in the Tanakh like only once, but and later in Chazal it's used more. And Gabriel flew to Egypt, tisa achat, like in one non-stop flight. V'shamat leveina im tita v'tinok echad ima sheshikuhu b'vinyan. He removed one brick that had a Hebrew baby in it. that they had placed inside. When the Egyptians enslaved them, they even put Hebrew babies in. And he brings that brick before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he says that's what the Egyptians did. Well, that determined the fate. The Yad Yashav Aleichem HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'midat hadin. So then Hashem sits in judgment. V'tibam miyam. That's when Hashem decided they're going to be drowned. Realize that among the things that make the splitting of the Yam Suf so amazing is the fact that simultaneously God is both destroying and saving. The ancient world, which didn't quite understand monotheism thoroughly, could understand the idea of there being forces of good and forces of evil, or forces of destruction and forces of birth. But the idea that there's only one God, which means that he does both, and simultaneously, as we're going to see, that took some understanding. But of course, that is the idea that Hashem is one. Source number 3 is a pretty famous source. We're not going to read all of it in the interest of time, but I'll just tell you briefly that in this source from the Gemara Sotah, the different tribes got into an argument who's going to go into the sea first. One version of the argument says you go first. Another version of the argument says I want to go first. The one that most people know is that one particular person went first. That's towards the end of that source. His name was Nachshon ben Aminadav. Nachshon ben Aminadav, who was the Nasi, was the head of the tribe of Yehuda. And he essentially took the idea that Hashem says that we should move forward, so he started to move forward. In the last lines of that source, he goes in, and essentially when he goes up, up to his nose, then Hashem makes the sea split.
Is that midrash?
Yeah, it's a midrash, but it's also recorded in the Gemara. There are midrashim in the Gemara. The source, if you can read my scroll, says that it's from Gemara Sotah. It's on pages Lamed Vav to Lamed Zayin. That's the place that talks a lot about Kriyat Yam Suf. Well, Hashem tells Moshe to raise the staff and so on, and to tell Bnei Israel to go. But until this point, nobody else went. And there are many miracles that happened at that moment. Look at source number 4. Ve'ata haremet matecha, Hashem tells Moshe, raise your staff. Asara nisim naso Yisrael al hayam. There were actually 10 miracles that were done to Israel at the sea. First, nivka hayam. The sea was split, which is itself amazing. Naasa kimin kippah. And it became like what's a kippah? A dome. So it wasn't just like this. Forget the cartoons. Forget like this. It was like this with a dome over it.
Yeah.
Like the
Aquarium.
isn't there one also in like Eilat too?
Yeah,
That's like that. Nechlak l'shnei masal gzarim. It was split into 12 parts, like 12 paths, 12 lanes, one for each tribe. Then Naasa kimin tit, the ground became like mud, apparently for the Egyptians, so that the Egyptians would be slowed down. Naaseh perurin, but it became, perurim are actually crumbs. It became crumbly earth, presumably for Israel, so that they could walk on dry land. Naaseh gzarim gzarim. It also became different. Gzarim here means like shards, broken rocks, again to hurt the Egyptians. Naaseh aremot aremot. They became piles and piles for Bnei Israel to walk through. So things are being done against the Egyptian. Other things are done for Israel. Hotzi lahem metukim mitoch meluchim. They were able to take sweet, meaning sweet water, out of salty water. The Yam Suf is salty, but along the way you get thirsty. So what do? Like a water fountain. And the water that came out for Bnei Israel was drinkable water. הקפיא להם את הים לשני חלקים ונעשה כמין בולוס. The sea became like two parts, and it became bolus means like a lump, shel zchuchit, a lump of glass, so that they could see what's being done to the Egyptians at the same time. So those are 10 miracles, and there's more. Source number 5. These are all midrashim. This midrash says, as Bnei Israel are going through, Hayita bat Yisrael overet bayam. Let's say a Jewish woman was going through the sea, ubena biyada, and she has her child in her hand, uvoche, and he's crying. So what does she do? Ufoshetet yada, she extends her hand, v'notelet tapuach o rimon mitoch hayam. She would take a tapuach, may mean an apple, may mean something else, or a rimon, that's a pomegranate, from the sea. She plucks it right out of the display case, and she gives it to him. And this is based on a pasuk. Ve'olichem batahomot bamidbar. Ma bamidbar lo chasru klum. Af batahomot lo chasru klum. It compares when they're going in the wilderness to the tahomot, the depths. They're walking through what would normally be the depths of the water, so they're cared for in the same way. Just as in the midbar, food is provided, so when they're walking through. Okay. So what we have to ask ourselves, just in a broader sense, is why was Kriyat Yam Suf necessary in order to accomplish what Hashem wanted to accomplish? So, for example, let's take a look at two sources from the Seforno, sources 7 and 8. Here's the way the Seforno explains what was happening. Bnei Yisrael halchu bayabasha, they went through on dry land. Be'od shemitzrayim hayu tovim bayam. At the very same time that the Egyptians were drowning in the sea, at the very same moment. It seems, just a couple of points, that it's not, again, not like the cartoons where, or even the movie the Ten Commandments, which is a movie as old as I am, like this, and they went through. But rather, they went in and they came out on the same side of the sea. And the Egyptians went in, and as Bnei Yisrael were moving ahead, Hashem makes the sea close in on them simultaneously, like a zipper, closing in on them at the very same time. The Seforno continues, Ki lo shav le'etano be'oto hakatzeh shahayu sham Yisrael. It did not go back into its original state at the same end where Israel was. So at one end, Israel was experiencing dry land, walls of water, 12 paths, etc. Pluck out an apple, drink sweet water. That's going on, and in the same path, at the same time, Hashem is making it all close in. The Seforno, further in source number 8, gives a very succinct explanation for why Kriyat Yam Suf was necessary in order to complete Yetziat Mitzrayim, or at least to complete this phase of Yetziat Mitzrayim. It says, Vayosha Hashem b'yomahu, that's a later pasuk, I didn't read it outside, but that Hashem saved Israel at that time, on that day, at Yisrael. Says the Seforno, he saved them b'mitat hamistolelim bam, through the death of those who abused them. It wasn't enough for them to leave Egypt and to leave the service of the Egyptians. The death of their oppressors was also necessary. As a result of the death of their erstwhile oppressors, they became truly free. How come? Ki ad eit motam hayu Yisrael ka'avadim borchim. Until the Egyptians died, the Israelites were like runaway slaves. As long as Bnei Yisrael could turn around, look over their shoulder, and wonder whether the Egyptians are chasing after them. A week later, a month later, years later, as long as they could worry about that, they weren't truly free. The Seforno's point is that's what made them free, by not only leaving Egypt, leaving the slavery, but also knowing that those who had enslaved them would never come after them again. Now, that's not the end of the process. We know that Bnei Israel needed to go through a great deal more. They needed to go through Kabbalat Torah and so on and so forth. But what we would call Yetziat Mitzrayim, the process of Yetziat Mitzrayim, that required Kriyat Yam Suf to take place as well. Just a word or two of insight from the Netivot Shalom about Kriyat Yam Suf. He says, among other things, Yetziat Mitzrayim, of course, is not just a liberation movement. It's the purpose of it is to establish Emunah, and Emunah, and not only bitachon but also Emunah. And he talks about there being 3 different levels of Emunah. This is the way the Netivot Shalom. This is the way he characterized it. There's one level of emunah which is in the moach, in the brain. There's one level in the lev, in the heart, and then there's one level in the evarim, in the organs of the body. Emunah can start as a thought, an idea, something I say I subscribe to, I believe in. But according to Netivot Shalom, when it permeates the personality and enters the heart, meaning enters the thought processes and also the emotions, then that's a more pervasive kind of emunah. And Yetziat Mitzrayim, walking out of Egypt, was for that purpose. But the highest level, he says, of emunah is when the emunah actually affects the evarim, the physical body, so that your body reacts. Your body behaves as a person of emunah. It's almost like we'd say reflexive. It's an interesting approach that it starts in the mind and eventually has an effect on the way the person behaves. And that could only be accomplished by Kriyat Yam Suf, because by then they were told to act. Act how? Not to fight, not to scream, but to listen to God. Go ahead. Go into the sea, and Hashem will take over from there. Towards the bottom, source number 9, we also talk about the Bnei Israel saying the Shirat Hayam in the morning, and it sounds like all of Bnei Israel said the Shirah. Source number 9, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, "B'shah shalu Yisrael bin Hayam," when they came up from the sea, natnu einehem lomar shira. They wanted to, they set their eyes on saying the Shirah. Ketzad amru Shirah. So, how did they do it? Olel mutal al birkei imo. There's a little child who is sitting on his mother's knee. V'tinok yonek mishudei imo, and a baby is nursing from his mother. Kevan shera'u et hashchina. Once they saw the Shekhinah, because Kriyat Yam Suf was Hitgalut Shekhinah. It was a real revelation of the divine presence. So not only the adults, but even Olel Higviat Savaro, the little toddler, lifted up his neck. The Tinok Shamat Dad Mipiv, he stopped nursing. The Amru, and even they sang Zeh Keli Venvehu. They said, this is my God and I will glorify him. Not to be outdone, Rabbi Meir goes even one step further. Afilu ubarim shebemei imam. Even the fetuses that were inside their mother, amru shira. They also sang shira. And then they ask him, but hare lo ra'u. But they couldn't see, they were inside. Don't worry, Hashem can do miracles. Amar Rabbi Tanchum. Paresh nasa lehem ke ispaklaria ha'me'ira. The belly became like a transparent mirror, and they were able to see. So they had they had a view of all of that. So Kriyat Yam Suf shows that Hashem cares for Bnei Yisrael the way he cares, the way a person would care for his or her children, because we are Bnei Yisrael. We are in a very real sense Hashem's children, and that's how Hashem takes care of us. Are there any questions? Because I don't want to go over. Yes.
In terms of the tribes and just like when they mentioned that when splitting of the sea and the different tribes, each tribe would go in fast. How come there were still tribes like even leaving out Egypt? Like I felt like they just left and everyone was like in their own like.
It would seem everybody knew which tribe they belonged to. They went to Egypt, at the time of Yaakov. The 12 tribes and their families, their children, grandchildren, and so on. And it would seem that they maintained an awareness of who belonged to which tribe.
Throughout the whole time being in Egypt.
Yeah, that's why it says that when they left al tziv otam, according to their hosts, meaning they knew which tribe they belonged to. Yeah.
Which path did the Arab route?
That's discussed as well. I think they had they kind of latched on. They had to get through somehow, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't have been much of a point. I don't think they had their own special lane. Yes.
Sorry, just to clarify. So on the 14th, was the human firstborn.
And the first Pesach, that same night.
Right, and
Pesach Mitzrayim.
Pharaoh said, "You could leave, let go." And we waited until 15 years and
Because Paro, you may want us to go now. We're only going to go when Hashem tells us to go. And Hashem says that they should go in the day rather than at night, so that nobody could say that they snuck out in the middle of the night.
Okay, so they didn't start making. Well, obviously they didn't start making like matzah on the 14th. Then.
Well, it says that they took the dough out with them, which they baked somewhere along the way. Yeah.
They didn't bake before.
Well, they had to have baked some before because the Korban Pesach had to be eaten with matzah also.
That was done on the 15th.
No, well, at night, the night, which is the end of the 14th, beginning of the 15th. That's what.
They left like in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So why didn't it rise?
Maybe I don't know exactly when they did the baking, but they must have done it quickly. Okay, Chag Kasher v'Sameach to everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.